So, you know that feeling when something, it just starts to shift inside you? When you maybe begin to see things a bit differently, make choices that, really feel right.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And then sometimes you notice this kind of subtle unease from the people around you.
Right, like a joke that doesn't quite land right, or maybe some advice that feels a bit off.
Exactly. Or just like a weird silence hangs in the air. Okay, let's get into this because today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that.
This whole idea of personal growth, developing what our sources are calling a strong mind.
Yeah, and how that can somehow lead to you feeling kind of alone or maybe even judged.
And the interesting thing, the sources suggest this isn't just, bad luck or something. It's almost a natural outcome.
A consequence of daring to think differently, apparently.
Which is fascinating, right? The core idea here is that cultivating this strong, independent mind, one that questions things, creates its own values. Well, that can genuinely make others uncomfortable.
And it's not necessarily about feeling superior or anything like that?
No, not at all. It's more that your way of thinking might accidentally shine a light on the unexamined beliefs holding maybe the group back. And that, that initial reaction is often discomfort.
Okay, I see. So our deep dive today is really about digging into why that happens.
Exactly. Why it happens and what it means for you as you're maybe going through your own growth.
Right. So this price of a strong mind, let's talk about that initial friction. You start changing internally.
And boom. Suddenly there's maybe those little disguised jokes you mentioned.
Yeah, or that unsolicited advice that's wrapped up as concern but feels different.
Or just awkward silences when you share something you genuinely think is insightful. What's really going on there?
What is the root cause?
Well, connecting it to just basic human stuff, our sources suggest your mental evolution, as they put it. It can genuinely feel like a threat to other people's comfort zones.
A threat? How so?
It might force them, maybe unconsciously, to face their own. Yeah. Let's call it complacency. Or maybe just an autopilot way of living.
Okay.
Your changing view can sort of highlight, without you even meaning to, a lack of questioning in others, or how much they rely on just accepted ideas.
Yeah.
You ever notice that? One person starts asking deeper questions in a group.
Oh yeah, things can get tense fast. It's like you've broken some unspoken rule.
Exactly. And that feeling, that tension, can then bubble up as your feeling of isolation.
Feeling misunderstood, maybe judged because you're thinking or acting differently.
Yeah, and the source material really hits this home with that line. What no one told you and what nature understood better than anyone else is that this is the price of building a strong mind.
Wow. That's a heavy quote. It really makes you wonder, why is there this almost built-in pushback?
Well, it taps into something fundamental about groups, maybe.
Yeah.
The source argues pretty bluntly that a truly powerful mind is a threat to collective mediocrity.
Collective mediocrity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Think about it. Real independent thought. It messes with routines, right? It challenges beliefs everyone just agrees on. It pushes against the group's, inertia.
So when you start really thinking for yourself, making your own values.
And ditching those ready-made truths, as the source says.
Yeah.
You become, in a sense, dangerous.
Dangerous. That sounds a bit dramatic. Dangerous how exactly?
Well, the source explains it. You become dangerous to the system, dangerous to others, and most importantly, dangerous to your former self.
Okay, break that down. Dangerous to the system.
Because you're not just passively going along with its structures anymore. To others.
Because my thinking might show up their limits. Ouch.
Maybe unintentionally, yeah.
Yeah.
And dangerous to your former self because you're actually leaving behind those comfortable, familiar ways of being.
It's a disruption on every level.
Pretty much.
Okay, that makes more sense, even if it's a bit unsettling. Now, actually building this strong mind, the source takes a pretty intense detour here, right? Into embracing chaos, even pain.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical self-help advice.
Not at all.
But the perspective is really interesting. It basically says real mental strength isn't built when life is easy and comfortable.
Right.
The source argues that real transformation actually comes through pain, through the fall, through chaos.
It mentions Nietzsche, doesn't it?
It does. You need to have a chaos inside you to give birth to a dancing star. And it stresses this isn't just poetry.
It calls it a psychological diagnosis.
Exactly. Think of that chaos, not as something terrible to be avoided at all costs, but as the raw stuff, the material you forge your most resilient self from. It's messy, uncomfortable,
but necessary.
That's the idea. It's the crucible.
A psychological diagnosis. So it's not just a nice metaphor for tough times make you stronger.
It seems to be suggesting something deeper. The source actually prompts you, the listener, think of the times you grew the most.
Was it when everything was fine? Or was it when you were shattered, lost directionless, having to rebuild yourself with your own hands?
Yeah, I remember reading that. It suggests we need to fundamentally change our relationship with things like pain, failure, even loneliness, if we want to build that indomitable spirit.
So instead of running from hard times, we should what? Lean into them, see them as catalysts.
Essentially, yes. The Force argues that as you actually learn to navigate chaos, maybe while others are running from it, that ability itself can disturb the world around you. Your resilience, your ability to handle things becomes this stark contrast.
You ever notice that someone who's been through serious hardship often has this quiet strength, a different vibe?
Definitely. A different perspective.
Okay, so this leads us into maybe the biggest concept here, the death of God. Drawing on Nietzsche again, it's a loaded phrase.
Hugely loaded.
Yeah.
And the source is careful here. It explains that when Nietzsche said God is dead, it wasn't like a party. It was a warning.
A warning about what?
About the erosion of that safety net, the belief in a higher power, a set plan, some external source giving life purpose.
Yeah.
It's stripping away the comfort that someone or something else is ultimately steering the ship.
So the comfort of like outsourcing responsibility, believing there's a divine plan, that's what's dead.
That's the core idea. And the source points out the scary part.
Okay.
No more easy excuses. The full weight of responsibility for your life, your choices, how you create meaning, it lands squarely on you.
No instruction manual, no guarantees.
Nope. No one else to ultimately blame, just you facing the chaos.
Wow. That sounds incredibly heavy. But the source says this can actually lead somewhere powerful.
Yeah, for those with the courage to face it, with the falling apart, the argument is it leads to forging an unshakable consciousness.
Unshakable consciousness.
The death of God, paradoxically, opens the door to radical freedom. You're not bound by external rules anymore. You have to create your own values. You have to surpass yourself.
Which leads to, what was the phrase? Brutal autonomy.
Brutal autonomy. Strikes you, doesn't it? And this freedom, this autonomy, is directly linked to power. The source puts it like this. When you understand that no one will come to save you, something within you awakens a fire that compels you to rise even while bleeding.
That's intense.
It's that ultimate understanding that it's all on you. Your fate is in your hands. That's what sparks this incredibly resilient inner drive.
And that leads to a whole new way of being, one that doesn't need the herd or external applause.
Precisely. It's moving beyond that need for group safety or external validation.
And this new way of being, this seems to be what the source calls the Übermensch, the overman. That sounds almost like a superhero.
Yeah, the name is a bit much, maybe, but the source clarifies quickly. It's not about superpowers.
Right.
It's about someone who has overcome or transcended the usual limits of ordinary life, like guilt other people put on you, blindly obeying norms, that pull of herd morality.
The constant need for approval.
Exactly. This is someone who, as the source says, creates their own internal laws and lives by them, even if that puts them at odds with the majority.
So their moral compass, their values, they come from inside, not from outside pressure.
That's the core of it. And that's why their mind becomes unbreakable, according to the source. It's not built on shifting sands like public opinion.
Or what other people expect.
Right. It's self-reliant. It's fueled by what Nietzsche termed the will to power, which, again, isn't about dominating others.
It's more like an inner drive to grow, overcome, shape your own life.
Precisely. That fundamental impulse to shape reality and meaning for yourself.
So it's a massive shift, really, from just reacting and adapting to the world.
To actively shaping it, prioritizing your own standard of excellence over just being comfortable.
Yeah, the source has that powerful question switch, doesn't it? Instead of asking, is this allowed?
The Übermensch asks, is this worthy of me?
That really flips the script. It's about imposing your own meaning, your own values, instead of just accepting what's given.
It captures it perfectly. But, and this is crucial, the source stresses the sacrifice involved.
What kind of sacrifice?
Letting go of those parts of you that still desperately want approval. Facing the real pain of maybe not belonging sometimes. Essentially building your identity from scratch. It's not easy.
And the source admits, right, that this is where a lot of people just tap out, go back to the comfortable illusion.
Yeah, it acknowledges that reality.
Yeah.
It's a tough path. But for those who stick with it, what happens?
Well, this seems to lead directly into that feeling of isolation we talked about earlier. It mentions Nietzsche's own life.
Right. The stronger your mind gets, the more independently you think.
Yeah.
The further you might drift from, the mainstream.
Which brings us neatly to the solitude of the strong. Sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? Stronger, yet more alone.
It does. But the source emphasizes this loneliness isn't always a deliberate choice, like becoming a hermit.
Okay.
It's more often a natural result of the world just struggling to understand or relate to someone who sees and acts so differently.
So it's others pulling away or just not getting it.
Could be. It uses that really stark analogy being thrown into the desert. No applause, no praise.
Just you. That's where the real test begins.
The desert, yeah.
Yeah.
No external validation at all. It's a challenging image.
Definitely.
And it's in that silence, that solitude, the source says, that your real self gets revealed, stripped bare of all the external stuff.
There's another Nietzsche quote there, isn't there? About the tribe.
Yes. The individual must always struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try, you will often feel lonely and sometimes scared, but no price is too high to pay for possessing yourself.
Possessing yourself.
Right.
The source calls that the rarest and most powerful achievement. What does that actually mean here?
It points to a state where you are truly your own master. You're not easily pushed around or manipulated by what others think or want.
Okay. Self-governing.
Right. But it comes with potential costs. You might outgrow relationships. People might misunderstand you.
You might get slapped with labels. Arrogant, strange, distant.
Exactly. But the source frames that as the price of not being domesticated, the cost of refusing to just fit in quietly.
Wow. And if you can't handle that solitude, the source implies you're not quite ready for real freedom yet.
That seems to be the implication. Solitude isn't punishment here. It's reframed as a privilege almost, a necessary battlefield for self-discovery and forging that independent thought.
A privilege and a battlefield. Interesting combo.
Because the truly free mind, it argues, starts seeing things others don't, or maybe won't. And that inevitably leads to a kind of clash, often silent, with collective mediocrity.
Okay, collective mediocrity again. This sounds like some kind of invisible pressure cooker. How does the source describe its workings?
It argues it works subtly, it levels down individuals, it creates this quiet system that kind of punishes thinking differently.
And rewards just going along, conforming.
Pretty much. It's described as a form of tyranny, but not necessarily from one specific leader. It's the pressure of the crowd itself.
The crowd demanding you stay in the box, maybe so they don't feel uncomfortable about their own box?
That's a good way to put it. So when you start to stand out, develop that sharper, independent mind, it's not that you're inherently bad. You're just disrupting the comfortable, maybe stagnant balance.
You're breaking the mold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And society, in its comfortable inertia, often dislikes those who break molds. The source even brings up slave morality.
Slave morality, what's that?
It's described as a value system born out of resentment by those maybe unable or unwilling to achieve greatness themselves. So they flip the script.
Oh.
They start calling strength, arrogance, independence, selfishness, things like that. It's a way to attack those who try to liberate themselves, to pull them back into the fold.
And these attacks, they aren't always shouting matches, are they? The source mentions subtle stuff.
Yeah, like disapproving looks, those pointed silences we talked about, maybe a bit of sarcastic irony.
The passive-aggressive toolkit.
You could say that. Mediocrity often fights with numbers, with consensus. It tries to make you doubt yourself just because you don't fit the dominant narrative.
But the source flips that script too, right? It says the strange, difficult, arrogant person
is often the one who's necessary. They're the source of the discomfort, the challenge needed to spark new ideas, real transformation.
So standing strong, thinking freely, it's not just personal, it's like a quiet act of defiance against that pressure.
The source definitely frames it that way. It calls it an act of war against collective mediocrity, one that needs its own mental weapons.
Mental weapons like clarity, conviction, the guts to stand alone.
That's the idea.
Okay, which brings us to the payoff, I guess. The final point. The price and power of being unbreakable. Sounds like a big trade-off. Costs and benefits.
Absolutely. The source is upfront about the costs. Reaching this level of mental strength is a kind of renunciation.
Meaning you give things up?
Yeah. You might lose superficial friendships, the ones based on just shared complacency. You might pass on opportunities that demand you shut up or conform. You might even give up a certain kind of easy contentment.
Contentment with little.
Maybe contentment with not questioning things too deeply.
But the gains, the source argues, make it worthwhile.
Totally. The invaluable gains are listed as integrity, real inner clarity, a stronger sense of presence in your own life.
And crucially, the ability to see through the noise, the comforting illusions the masses might live by.
Exactly. Seeing through the slumber, as it puts it. And this strength, it reminds us, isn't a one-time achievement. It comes from an ongoing internal war. It's a process.
Not a final victory, then.
No. The goal isn't really to get followers or tell everyone else how to live. It's more about sparking that internal questioning in others.
Encouraging them to stop looking outside for validation or for easy, ready-made answers.
Precisely. And that's what dangerous means in this context. It's not about being aggressive.
It's about being so authentic.
Yes.
So real.
That your very way of being challenges others. It nudges them maybe to confront themselves, their own truths, their own ways of living.
Right. Wow. Okay. So if any of this deep dive has struck a chord with you listening,
if you've maybe felt that weird pushback as you've started to grow or change,
it might just mean that important internal shift, it's already happening.
Definitely a sign.
Maybe it's worth just sitting with these ideas for a bit. The discomfort that seems to come with real growth.
The need for solitude sometimes on that path.
And that constant subtle challenge of dealing with a world that often just wants everyone to stay comfortably the same.
Yeah. And maybe ask yourself this moving forward.
Yeah.
What's a truth you feel you've been holding back?
Or an opinion you're maybe scared to voice because you might feel isolated.
Is there a thought that makes you feel like an outsider, but deep down you know it's genuinely yours?
Exploring those kinds of questions, that could be a really powerful next step, right? On that journey to building a stronger, more authentic, just a more you.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's about embracing that ongoing journey.
Powerful stuff to think about. Thanks for exploring this with us.
Absolutely.
Until our next deep dive, keep questioning, keep growing,